Let me introduce our next speaker, Professor Julia Hirschberg. Professor Julia Hirschberg is from Columbia University. She's a fellow member of IEEE, AAAI, ACM, ISCA, and ACL, and she's very well known for her work on speech emotions and multilinguality, code switching, speech recognition. So let's welcome Professor Julia Hirschberg.
Okay, thank everybody for still being here. I would like to talk about some work we've been doing for almost 10 years now on detecting code switching in dialogue, and we're working on both speech now and text. We started in text, and now we're doing both. So you may ask, what is code switching? For people who speak more than one language, they would be talking with other people who also speak more than one language, and hopefully these are the same two languages or three. And this involves changing the language a speaker uses between one language and another. And as they talk with another speaker, I have to figure out whether to use my glasses or not. So code switching is a common phenomenon in the US and definitely in other countries. And I wanted to ask how many people here, please raise your hand if you code switch. Oh boy, this is great. So any comments will be very well accepted. Here are some examples for people who maybe do not. And I do not code switch. I only speak English, unfortunately, but I will present these as a code switcher. Pero why do I have to go a la casa? Or gracias. Thank you for the lovely gift. Here I come, mi hermano, and a mí no me gusta eso. Why me pisa a mí? And that's stomp on, which I didn't realize what it was. Until I looked that up. So basically, there are different types of strategies of code switching that have been identified and that we have been working on, and many of them come out in the literature. The main ones that we're going to talk about today, rather rapidly, are insertional code switching, which involves just the insertion of a single word or a short phrase in one language into an utterance in another language. And then there's alternational code switching. And this involves code switches at grammatical clause boundaries. We'll also refer to other code switching when it involves the use of a filler word at the start or end of a sentence. And here you can see monolingual. Do you have any friend who studies linguistics? ¿Tienes algún amigo que estudia lingüística? Or do you have any amigo who studies lingüística? And that also is insertional. ¿Tienes algún friend que estudia linguistics? That's insertional, starting with another language. And do you have any friend que estudia lingüística? ¿Tienes algún amigo that studies linguistics? And neither of these is Pero. She is the case manager for those patients. So I don't know if you all think about the way you do code switching when you code switch, but sometimes you do it just with a word, and sometimes you do it with a longer utterance. So here are some more examples of different types of code switching, the insertional ones and the alternational ones. Insertional, as I said before, is just simple code switches of single words or very short phrases. And pero mi printer no funciona, but my printer doesn't work. And alternational is the more complex one, where you have grammatical clause boundaries. No la puedes hacer because you can't check it. How many people have done both of these? Or do you even think of what you've been doing? Anyhow, it might be fun if you try these out at lunch and just see what other people are thinking. Okay, so there's some very useful corpora that we've been using and that we've actually been doing some annotation on. How many people know about the Hansard corpus? It's a very famous one for French-English data in the Canadian House of Commons, and people have been using this one for a long time. Anyhow, it goes between French and English, and we're working on this now. There's an IBM corpus for this and also a Belcore corpus, and both of these are pretty big. So I have a student now who's focusing on this for her master's thesis, and she's basically looking into lots of different aspects that I'll be discussing later. Then, one corpus that a lot of people have used, and we've been using a lot, is the Miami Bangor corpus. How many people know about this one? Couple? Well, it's definitely worth looking into if you're interested in Spanish-English conversations, and it's pretty big. It's 35 hours. Then, there's the SANE corpus. How many people know about this one? It's Mandarin and English. Some people do. Good to know that some people know about this stuff. This is a big one, 192 hours of speech, and there are a bunch of different speakers from both Singapore and Malaysia. And that is a lot of words across the 256 dialogues that are being produced and annotated. And our last one here is the Mesak corpus. It's a Hindi-English corpus. And it's Hindi-English soap operas, so it's very interesting, kind of fun. And basically, it was created to be able to define sarcasm and humor. And this is a bit smaller. There are 15,000 utterances across 50 episodes. And we annotated these ourselves extensively for audio and text-based features, as well as whether the code switching in them is insertional or alternational. And now, my friend, I have a lot of students who are working on this project. Right now, I think there are about 9. And we've had many, many more working on it before. They're really interested in it. So now they're annotating dialogue acts. That is this a declarative sentence? Is it a question, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? How many people have worked on dialogue acts? Anybody here? Well, it's very interesting in terms of recognizing what people are interested in or asking about, and also how you can produce appropriate responses. So, in the past, we've done a lot of work on this Miami Bangor corpus, and also on the Hansard corpus. And we've looked at things like cognate words. These are words in different languages, so they're being code switched in some cases, with the same etymology and the same spelling and meaning. Sort of similar spelling and meaning, well, similar spelling and yes meaning, such as abrupt and abrupto, and arc and arco. And we found that cognates often precede a code switch portion of the utterance. So when you're going to start to code switch, you start with a word that is very close to the other language, and present that word, and then you start getting into other words that are more appropriate or more necessary for that language. And also, what we did find when we worked on this in part of speech was that nouns, proper nouns, interjections, and determinators are the most likely things to be code switched, and auxiliary verbs, and pronouns are not very likely to. So you're likely to code switch with nouns more than verbs, which is quite interesting. Nouns more than verbs? We've been looking into this, and hopefully we'll find some results. Okay. We also looked at things that we call formality levels. We wanted to think about, so is code switching occurring more when people are speaking in a formal language way or an informal language when you're just chatting with a friend? And what are the differences in syntax and the speaking style? And what we found was that in phone conversations, fitness talks, fitness YouTube videos, and fairly formal TED Talks, broadcast news, and legal proceedings. We compared the use of formal and informal part of speech and found that things like pitch, intensity, jitter, shimmer, speaking rate, and pauses might be useful. And here are our findings. I'm going to show you the findings for all of the different things that we've done. We found that conversation becomes more formal as some formal parts of speech are being used. And in English and Spanish phone conversations, they have a higher variation in speaking rate than in TED Talks. How many people have looked at TED Talks? It's also online all the time. And you can look at tons and tons of TED Talks. But also for Spanish, it's also important in broadcast news, the code switching. And we also found that for jitter and shimmer variation in English, Spanish, and Hindi, and we looked into similarity for mean duration of pauses in English and Spanish. But our text measures of formality, because this was back when we were working on primarily on text rather than speech, didn't correlate with these different speech measures, although they were a very good measure of formality of speech, but people were not necessarily code switching them. So this was an early thing that we did with some other students, and it was what we were doing on textual conversation more than speech and text. So now I'm going to go into, perhaps very quickly, our more recent work in both text and speech. And one thing that we've been working on for a long time is studying entrainment. Entrainment means when you're talking to somebody else, you start talking like them in a number of different ways. And this shows that you like them and that you want to continue the conversation. So I recommend this to everyone. Try some entrainment if you want to get something, perhaps, or just be friendly. Anyhow, it's called linguistic alignment or accommodation or coordination. And basically, you're just adapting your own speaking style to that of the person you're talking to. So we examined the Miami Bangor corpus. This was the Spanish-English corpus, and looked for lexical entrainment, like, are you going to use the same words that the other person is using? And check that out. And also filled pauses. And we also looked at prosodic features. So are you entraining to the other person by talking like them? Not just what you say, but how you say it. And we also studied whether a conversation was entraining at different levels, turn levels, synchrony, or convergence. That is, was it going back and forth, entraining in the just one sentence or one utterance in another, or was it in synchrony? It was all training back and forth into the same conversation, or did people become more like the other person as they entrained? So these are just different methods of entrainment that you can do too, if you want to. But a lot of people don't know when they're in training. If you ask them, oh, were you in training? They have no idea. So anyhow, it's good to collect the data. And what we found is that when one speaker code switches, guess what? The other person starts code switching and matches whether it's just alternational code switching, that is, you're including one word, new word in an utterance of another language, or if you're actually doing alternational or insertional code switching, both. So you can code switch in both ways, either by just, if the other person is just using one word, then you're just using one word in the other language. But if the other person is using a whole phrase, then I will begin, if I code switch, using the whole phrase. So there's a lot of similarity in how code switching can actually influence the way people are talking with other people. So we found that entrainment in this corpus did occur on both lexical features and also on speech features. It wasn't just what they say, but how they're saying it, including pitch, intensity, and harmonics to noise ratio. That's your degree. Now, this is really a good one. Harmonics to noise ratio, how many people know what that is ever? Okay, it is the degree of hoarseness or breathiness in your voice. Isn't that, we thought that was pretty weird, that when people are code switching with another person, they start talking like hoarser or breathier if the other person is talking hoarser or breathier. Think about this in all your conversations and see if you're doing it, because we found it was pretty relevant and pretty often happening. And interestingly enough, we found that same gender pairs in this corpus tended to entrain more with each other. So men with men and women with women. Okay, so that was one thing that I went over pretty quickly. I'll go over another thing pretty quickly, which we're still working on, which is empathy. And we're working on empathy both in code switching and also just in English. So empathy, and this is the important one. Can I just use this water, I guess? Oh,
somebody else's water.
Maybe I should use another water.
Whoa, this is not a... Okay, bring me some water.
Okay. Okay. Anyhow, I will try to go on and speak without breathiness and hoarseness. So basically, empathy is a really cool thing. It's the ability, yeah? You're looking at the other person. It's the ability to understand other people's feelings as if you're having them yourself, and try to respond accordingly. So speech features are so if I say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, can we help you?" That would be empathy, okay? And that happens a lot, particularly with people who are, oh, thank you. Particularly with people who are psychiatrists or psychologists or people who are doing mental health issues, and they're trying to make the other person feel comfortable about telling them what's going on. So they do speak slower, lower pitch, and lower intensity. At any rate, you also use lexical features such as agreement or being informal words or hedge words such as no, I know, I feel, do you feel, I think. Those are hedge words, and often words like, about, really, and kind of when you're being empathetic. So here's one. Pero ahora, this is in code switching and empathy, and I'll try to be empathetic. Pero ahora mismo tú me estabas diciendo que te gustaba y te parecía nice. But right now you were telling me that you like it and you think it's nice. And that might be something that would be something that the person maybe shouldn't like doing. So we built language models. We're building LLMs and all of this stuff on our English empathy corpus and translated the text of our 3 code switching corpora into English, and then used this to identify empathetic speech in code switching. So our findings were that code switching utterances align with lexical correlates of empathy more than monolingual utterances in all corpora. And in all these 3 corpora, which were different language pairs, the alignment of spoken correlates is weaker. So it was more in what they said rather than how they said it that made speech empathetic. So what it made us think is probably empathy is spoken differently in different languages, and that's something that I think it would be good for us to continue to study. So another thing we've been working on, and I used to be at AT&T Bell Labs. First I was at Bell Labs and then at AT&T Bell Labs. Anybody here used to be at AT&T? Thank you. Well, anyhow, it was a wonderful place to work for a long time. Basically, we were working then on identifying different types of prosodic features and seeing which ones actually were used in different cases and different types of speech. So we were comparing prosody in monolingual speech, and we were just looking at things like pitch, intensity, and speaking rate in the U.S. English and the Spanish Carl Home corpora to those used in. So basically, we were looking at corpora that are just English or just Spanish and comparing those, prosody in those, to the prosody used in the Bangor code switching corpus. And this was a major kind of finding, because basically what we found was, of course, there were differences in prosody in the two languages when people just spoke one language or the other language. But compared to the Bangor corpus, we found that F0 contours were lower in code switching in Bangor with less variation, and energy values in code switching are higher, and voicing rate and duration of pauses are lower in code switching. But we found a lot of other things too. So overall, the English and Spanish produced in code switching did tend to sound lower in pitch, louder, less rhythmic, and less disjointed than the monolingual corpora. So they were changing the way they were producing things even when they were producing their own language, either English or Spanish in the code switch data. But monolingual utterances produced closer to code switching utterances in Bangor would have a different type of pitch, intensity, and energy, and lower voice rating. And basically, the interesting thing that we discovered beyond all of this stuff was that when people are code switching, then the code switch portion of what they're saying has a completely different pitch, intensity, and speaking rate than when they're talking with their normal language. And this is something also that we're continuing to figure out. What is it that is different about the code switch portion of that utterance that's different from both English and both Spanish? It's just different. So that's another thing to think about if you're going to code switch. You're going to speak in a very different way for the code switching portion. So here's some work that we've done, and I'm getting close to the end, I think, on language proficiency in multilingualism. So we found that people who are multilingual speakers are known to code switch across language pairs in association with different kinds of aspects of language, so at different types of things that they're doing. So we want to know, how is a speaker's language proficiency related to their code switching? How good am I at both of these languages? How good then can I code switch? So once again, we examined the Bangor-Miami corpus, and basically we analyzed differences in linguistic and demographic profiles of the speakers. So we looked in this case both at parents and at their children. And both of them, both groups did some code switching, but what were the methods that changed from parents to code switching? So here's what we found. And as you know, we found a lot of different results, but what we found, and I don't think anybody else has done this on comparing parent code switching to children code switching. This is some of our more recent works. We found that the parents' primary language, is their primary language Spanish or English? And the speaker's type of secondary schooling. Have they been going to a school where people are speaking, say, Spanish? And there are schools in New York City that people can presumably, they're mostly Spanish speaking, but there are also a lot of English speaking schools. So it was what kinds of upper level schooling the kid was getting, and also what they reported as their ability were strongly associated with code switching, the amount of code switching in language distribution. So anyhow, this again is just what I said, the quantity of code switching in parents' Spanish-English speech is strongly associated with their children's code switching behavior, but the children's type of education, and this is not surprising, also had a big effect. So this is some of our more recent work, and we found that there's a potential indirect relationship between language proficiency and the strategy of code switching occurring in conversation. So anyhow, this just goes on for what I've just said. It's really important and what we would like to do, but unfortunately people who have created code switching databases sometimes do not get enough information about the people who actually they are collecting data from. And that's what I'm sure everybody needs to know. You want to know a lot about the different aspects, the gender, not just the gender and the native language and things like that, but a lot of other things that you would like to know about these people to try to figure out what makes them code switch in different ways. So one last thing, and then I'm going to be pretty done, except for the very last bit, but I'll be out by good time. This is another thing that we've been doing. We wanted to figure out how did different kinds of things that you're talking about, when did that influence code switching? And so we looked at different things like you're talking about something academic, or you're talking about something that's cultural, relates to your culture, or personal conversations, or something professional. And we annotated the Mandarin English corpus from Southeast Asia and analyzed all these discourse topics in that one. So what we found was, and this is like, when do people tend to code switch? Well, discourse topics interact significantly with code switching, and they result in different patterns of code switching, and here they are. We found that utterances about academia, not surprising, cultural, personal, and professional were twice as likely to be code switched as other topics, and academic and professional utterances were more likely to be insertional code switch. That means you just would put in one word in the other language, and also were most frequent. But cultural and personal utterances were less likely to be code switch. But when they were alternational. People would give a whole utterance, a whole phrase in that one. So this is the first that anybody has done on this. And we're just contributing to a broader understanding of the discourse topics that motivate speakers to code switch. Here's a final one. We looked at, well, do named entities and dialogue acts influence code switching? Sorry, there's so much stuff about code switching. Well, discourse level aspects of dialogue, they influence patterns of code switching. And we wanted to know the distribution of named entities in code switch words and how is code switching influenced by the dialogue acts. So we again analyzed the Bangor Miami corpus, and this is what we found. Named entities don't occur very much in the corpus, but they're much more rare in code switching contexts than in monolingual. So references to things like Friday or religious information are more likely to be associated with this kind of code switching. But when people are talking about places, people, brand names, products, and commercial labels, there's more monolingual speech. So differences in code switching there. And for dialogue acts, utterances such as acknowledgement, back channels, questions, and laughter were less likely to contain code switching, but self-directed comments were more associated with code switching than with monolingual utterances. So overall, named entities to some extent, but discourse functions encoded by dialogue acts have a stronger influence on code switching. So lots and lots of things. Now, our future work, and this will be wrapping us up. How do we identify information load? And that is the difficulty of producing particular words. Some words are just harder to produce in a language when you're code switching. How do intonational contours, which I have worked on for many years, differ in monolingual versus code switch speech? And what we are finding already is that those do, when you start code switching, they differ from what you're doing in English or in Spanish without code switching. And how do we identify code switching in low resource languages? Because Spanish, English, Mandarin, Hindi are not low resource languages. And how can we generate natural sounding code switching in text and speech as well as identifying it? So how can we produce this appropriately in conversation? Why is this important? As you all know, and I'm sure you're doing, there's lots and lots of work being done now on voice assistants. And there are a lot of people that are using those, particularly from Apple or Google or Microsoft Copilot or Amazon Alexa. There are a lot of people that code switch and want to use these voice assistants or chatbots. So these can enable vast improvements in information access for people who speak languages that may not be very well understood from a code switching perspective. So a lot more needs to be done on this. But this access is primarily right now limited to monolingual speech. I know some institutions or some groups are able to understand code switch speech, but being able to produce it effectively is still on the horizon, for sure. And this may be for hundreds of thousands of people who are using, say, a particular phone or other instrument. So while a lot of research is being done, speech is rarely understood correctly by voice assistants. A lot of voice assistants can't do it and rarely able to be reproduced. A major barrier to enabling this is the lack of speech technology that not only can understand code switching, but also produce it human-like using a chatbot. We're working on a lot of chatbots, and some of them are trying to code switch, at least appropriately. And it really does need to change. So we really do need to develop AI agents who can code switch correctly for many hundreds of thousands of users. Okay, and these are my publications. They're in here. You can look at them if you want to, but we have done a lot of work on this. So that's it. Any questions? I think I have a few minutes. Nope.
May I ask a question to your right?
Oh.
Hi.
Oh.
I work at psychiatry in Mount Sinai, and we're currently working with a study where we have this like multilingual cohort where several are code switching. So I was curious if you had any work on how code switching relates to various like pathologies or cognition or anything like that?
Yes.
Or directions to start looking at that
Yes,
sort of thing?
we are doing a lot of work on that. And if you want to send me mail, I can share with you. We may not have produced any. Oh, thank you. We may not have put out a lot of stuff yet for that, but we definitely have done a lot of work on that for sure.
That's amazing.
So,
Thank you.
love to. Oh yeah. No, that's a really. I mean, we're doing a lot of work on medical health, mental health, and medical health stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi.
Thank you, Dan.
So that was really an amazing, plethora
There's
of work.
so many stuff.
Yeah. But it was really satisfying to see you doing just real great science on this topic. At the end, at the time I was all the way through, I was thinking like, this is amazing. Why are you doing this? And then in the end you say, oh, because it's so important for chatbots and interactive agents. I'm not sure I totally buy that that's why you've done all this stuff.
No, it's not at all.
I'm inviting you to...
This is a new prospect, yes.
Yes, absolutely. But like, what is it that... And particularly, I don't code switch. You said you don't code switch. And so it must be interesting, but who knows? What is it that's driven you to like push all this research, to try and just dig in and find out what's going on with this phenomena?
A lot of my students code switch. And a lot of students overall code switch a lot. Primarily, a number of them code switch when they're talking about something having to do with their studies. And that's how we got into this. It just seemed, wow, we should really be working with these kids to try to help to figure it out. Wow. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, yes.
Julia. So this is like super interesting from the point of view of children's speech. Just trying to add something to the previous question of knowing how much the parents do the code switching is super important for the development of the kid's brain.
Yes.
That is, there are papers, lots of papers on that, but the technology is not yet there. And another thing that is just like a curiosity. Have you studied, for example, the demographics of the Spanish data set, the Bangor Miami data set? So, for example, I'm Mexican. My accent and my code switching is Mexican, right? But my partner is from Spain, and so I think I'm sweeter than him. I'm not sure, but it seems that that it is also like this cultural and background factor that affects also the code switching, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
that
I want to know
corpus
your
was
thoughts.
collected in Florida, between people who spoke English and Spanish. So that's how it was collected. And they sat in a bar and just chatted.
So yeah, so I'm not sure how easy this could be, but I'll maybe try to get like people from Spain also to go switch,
Yes.
so that you can really compare how harsh they can be. Sorry, no, not really, but I don't know. And even in Mexico, the how we speak in different parts of Mexico is different. That can also influence the code switching. And one last thing, the Merlion data set for kids, it's like a child-centered speech. It's also code switching speech. And
Oh,
we want to-
wow.
yeah, it's English. It's kind of similar to the CIMI data set. But yeah, we can share more thoughts. Thank you.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank
This
you.
is amazing. Thank you.
Because there's another corpus that's being created now in Arizona, I think, Arizona or New Mexico, anyhow, and it's Spanish-English. So Spanish-English is different everywhere, apparently. But yes, that would be lovely to do the kid stuff. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, amazing presentation. Like, I've been code switching all my life, and then
Excellent.
it's really fascinating for me to just see like studies of this, and two things I would like to see is, one thing is, as previously mentioned, demographics, even like within the same language pair, like different people from different places might have different behaviors, and also I think different language pairs also have different, maybe it leads to different conclusions, because so I was grew
Probably.
up in Guangzhou, so it's where we mainly speak Cantonese, but we also speak Mandarin in school, so we code switch all the time. And I think I have at least I have one clue that like maybe why earlier, like it's the nouns is much more likely to code switch than verbs, and I think it's like for us, I remember in primary school and secondary school, like when we have concepts, foreign concepts, that's not daily concepts, we just instantly switch to Mandarin. Or when we are referring to like people's names, brand names, that's not local to that area, we would code switch.
Yeah. And the problem with the other data sets that have been collected is people didn't really get a lot of information about the people who were speaking. So
got it.
that's why now we're trying to get more and more of these things. Yeah.
Right.
Lots of information about them. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. I think that's it. Oh, one more. Yeah, sure.
Sure. So I attended a very nice talk by one of your Columbia colleagues, John McWhorter,
Yeah.
on code switching.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I know
and-
John.
Yeah, and the very interesting thing that he brought up was essentially in many languages, including many Indian languages, but also European ones, there is a formal language and there is an informal. And people often will code switch between those depending upon the situation. And also, there is sort of all these regional dialects which you switch between and so forth. So there is
Yes, I've
it's a
seen
much
his
more
work
complex
too.
kind of.
Yeah, he is great.
Yeah.
He's just wonderful. And he's done he's putting stuff out in the New York Times all the time. But yeah, he's great. Anybody who's at Columbia, take his class. My husband has taken some of his classes and loved them. So yeah, he's good. One more. Yeah,
Hi, Julia. Thank you
Hi.
very much for the wonderful talk.
sure.
I am a cognitive neuroscientist by training, and it was very enlightening to hear about all of your research and how it applies to my research in particular as well. And I just wanted to speak here because our lab is currently collecting a lot of cross-language data sets in children. And
Oh,
wanted to be
beautiful.
here to introduce myself for potential collaborations for people who are working along in the same lines. And I know Paolo's talk earlier is related as well. So I think another question earlier talked about psychiatry-related things, but I'd love to chat more after
Yes,
this.
absolutely. Yeah.
My name is
Anybody-
Ahana Bhattacharya. I'm currently at Yale University.
Okay. Yes, I'd be happy to talk to anybody else after this that, maybe wants to work on something or stuff like that, or just wants to find out something about some of these languages. Okay, thank you all so much. Appreciate it.